Welcome to Lecture 13 for CED405 Spiritual Formations. Our final lecture for the course will cover church assemblies. A commonly misunderstood concept within the Christian community pertains to the identity and organization of the church. Many view the church as either a place of worship or just a local group that meets for singing and a sermon. The purpose of this lesson will be to define the church biblically and discuss several details pertaining to its assemblies. Let's first begin by defining what the church actually is. In the Greek, the word translated church, ekklesia, means called out. This is a combination of two Greek words, ek, which means out of, and kaleo, which means to call. Therefore, those who make up the church are those who have been called out for a purpose. But where did we get the word church from? The English word church comes from the Greek kuriakos, meaning belonging to the Lord. This means that the translators of the Bible not only saw the church as a group of individuals called out for service to Christ, but also a group of individuals who belonged to the Lord. Thirdly, the church is a local group of believers. The Greek word ekklesia is used 117 times in the New Testament. Out of those 117 times, 114 times it refers to the body of Christ. 95% of the time when it is talking about the body of Christ, it is making reference to a local church. Well, then that means there is a 5% leftover, which refers to letter D. The church is a universal group of believers. With that in mind, this means that we are all a part of one body of Christ, with several smaller bodies that, yes, meet separately due to geographical limitations, but are all connected under Christ. We can see this defended in two primary passages. In Matthew 16:18, Jesus said, "Upon this rock I will build my church," singular. And 1 Corinthians 12:13 says, "For by one Spirit are we all baptized into one body." Fifthly, and importantly, we must remember that the church is not a place, it is a people. It is not a building, it is a body. It is not an organization, it is an organism. This means that Christians do not go to church. The church assembles together. Now that we've defined what the church is biblically, let's answer the question of why should the church assemble? First, the church should assemble in order to be obedient. The writer of Hebrews said in Hebrews chapter 10, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." But not only should the church assemble in order to be obedient, secondly, the church should assemble in order to be taught. One of the reasons the early church assembled together was to devote themselves to learning the apostles' doctrine. That devotion should still be modeled by us today. Thirdly, the church should assemble in order to exercise its spiritual gifts. As our previous lecture on this topic already detailed, we were all given at least one spiritual gift at the moment of our regeneration for the purpose of edifying the body of Christ. And the best way to accomplish that task is by assembling together and using them. Fourthly, the church should assemble in order to fellowship with other believers. The context of 1 Corinthians 12 pertains to the reality that God has uniquely designed each of us, and we need each other in order to properly function together. This is accomplished when we assemble and encourage one another through fellowship. Then, letter E, the church should assemble in order to promote accountability. As was already seen in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24, we are to assemble together in order to provoke each other toward love and good deeds. Accountability helps accomplish this task. The next reason why the church should assemble is to encourage stewardship. As we learned in a previous lecture, the Lord desires that we give of our time, our talents, and our treasures. When we assemble together, we are given an avenue for all three of these. And finally, the church should assemble in order to worship the Lord with others. All throughout the New Testament, we can observe the church assembling together in order to proclaim the Lord's worth, or to worship Him. We should continue that declaration even today. So now that we've defined what the church is and why we should assemble, let's look at Roman numeral 3. When should the church assemble? Letter A. According to Acts chapter 2, verse 42, the New Testament supports assembling daily. However, the New Testament also supports assembling weekly. The fact that the church did meet daily, but also would just meet weekly, demonstrates that there is no one particular day or number of days we must meet together each week. And now that we've seen that there is no particular day that we must assemble together, let's answer Roman numeral 4. Where should we assemble? Well, letter A. In the New Testament, the church is recorded as assembling in religious buildings. However, I must make note that they did not meet in a, quote, church building. In fact, they would go and meet in the temple. But not only did they meet in religious buildings, letter B, they also assembled in houses. This actually became the primary meeting place for the New Testament church, most likely on account of the resistance that they began receiving when they met in those religious buildings. And finally, the New Testament church assembled anywhere that they could. Again, this is because the church is a body, not a building. So, it can meet anywhere. That brings us to the end of Lecture 16 for CED405 Spiritual Formations.